So we're going to have our first reading, which is Bridget. So hopefully Bridget is there with us on Zoom.
I am.
Yes.
Psalm 124. God, the protector of his people. What if the Lord had not been on our side? Answer, O Israel. If the Lord had not been on our side when our enemies attacked us, then they would have swallowed us alive in their furious anger against us. Then the flood would have carried us away. The water would have covered us. The raging torrent would have drowned us. Let us thank the Lord, who has not let our enemies destroy us. We have escaped like a bird from a hunter's trap. The trap is broken and we are free. Our help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. This is the word of the Lord.
Our gospel reading today is from Mark chapter 9, beginning at verse 38. Teacher, said John, we saw a man driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop because he was not one of us. Do not stop him, Jesus said. No one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us. I tell you the truth. Anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name because you belong to Christ will certainly not lose his reward. And if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a large millstone tied round his neck. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with two hands to go out into hell where the fire never goes out. And if your foot causes you to sin, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life crippled than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where their worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with each other. I wonder if we realise how many times we use that little word, if. It's such a tiny word, but it has masses of meaning. We say, if it's fine tomorrow, we'll do this or that, or if you don't hurry, you'll miss the bus. If you're good, we can do this. If I get my work done in time, if only I'd been there when that happened, if I won the lottery. What if my taxi doesn't turn up, the bus doesn't turn up, all of those kind of things. If only. It's a word for hopes, dreams, for dreading what's going to happen, for what could have happened. It's for regrets, for fears and joys and hopes and expectations. My mum was full of little sayings from her own mum, my granny. And if we were full of ifs, we're trying to bargain for something, you know, as children do. If we're good, can we do this? If this and if that? She would say, if ifs and ands were pots and pans, then beggars would be choosers. I've never quite worked out what that means. Anybody else heard that one? Yeah, the hand's gone up. If is very much part of the language of our daily lives. If it's not broke, don't fix it. If at first you don't succeed, and all that kind of thing. I'm sure we could spend time thinking about all the ways we use if. Just because I can, I looked up how many times that little word appears in the Bible, and depending on what version it's from and who's worked it out, it's 1,784 or 1,521. Just thought you'd like to know that. However, it's a lot. We have it 5 times in our gospel reading and twice in Psalm 124. Psalm 124 is known as one of the group of psalms known as Psalms of Ascent. Psalms 120 to 134 are also called pilgrim songs. These psalms were grouped together for use in travelling toward Jerusalem for the yearly Jewish festivals. Now, the city of Jerusalem is situated on a high hill, and Jews travelling to Jerusalem for one of the 3 main annual Jewish festivals traditionally sang these songs on the ascent up the uphill road to the city. And according to some traditions, the Jewish priests also sang some of these songs of ascent as they walked up the steps to the temple in Jerusalem. And the theme of each song of ascent offers much encouragement for us today. For example, Psalm 121 is about joyful praise to the Lord, but Psalm 127 is about God's blessing on our efforts. And Psalm 132 is about God's sovereign plan for his people. And today's Psalm 124 is about help comes from the Lord. These Psalms are great for helping us to pray and worship and to receive God's hope and encouragement. And perhaps we can hold that image of going up to the temple whenever one of them or one of the other praisey kind of Psalms comes along. If in the beginning of Psalm 124 has the flavour of relief, the Message version reads, if God hadn't been for us, all together in Israel, sing out, we would have been swept away by the flood of rage. Oh, blessed be God, he didn't go off and leave us, helpless as a rabbit in a pack of snarling dogs. A great translation. He didn't go off and leave us. Psalm 124 speaks of God being where our help comes from and asks the question, where would we be without God? The little word if always asks us to imagine what it would or could be like if, what will be happen if something happens or if we don't do this or that. Reading Psalm 124 and thinking about if and how the psalmist is imagining what would have happened if God hadn't been on their side, I found myself thinking about the song with that name, Imagine, made so famous by the Beatle John Lennon. In Liverpool, there's a Beatles museum with a mock-up of the cellar where they first performed. The real cellar, incidentally, is still there and it's still open. You can go down and it's got musicians and bars and so on. I think it's sort of 2 floors down. It's quite a way. Anybody been there? Yeah, more hands go up. In the museum, the Beatles Museum, there's a room where the figure of John Lennon plays his piano and the song, Imagine, plays on a loop. It's very evocative. It's one of those songs that seems to get right inside you emotionally, and it's often used in times of tragedy. I've often wondered about the song and felt a bit wary of it, thinking it's not particularly Christian. So I looked into what motivated John Lennon to write it. I read that in an interview for Playboy magazine shortly before his death in December 1980, Lennon shared that someone had given him and Ono, his wife, a Christian prayer book which had inspired him to write the track. In the interview, John Lennon spoke about the concept of positive prayer. He's reported to have said, You can imagine a world at peace with no denominations of religion, not without religion, but without this, my God is bigger than your God thing. Then it can be true. For me, this was a very interesting thought as I pondered the reading from Mark that we have today. In the context, Mark writes, this episode comes after the disciples have been squabbling over who would be the greatest. And last week, Margaret spoke about how Jesus placed a little child among them. Remember that in that society, a child would have been one of the lowest of the low. To demonstrate that following him was not about status, but about humility and service to all. Margaret pointed out how hard it was for the disciples to understand what following Jesus was going to mean, serving and suffering and humility, that far from being a mighty conquering king, his was servant leadership. I was intrigued to read in last Sunday's newspaper that the Modern Army last year established a diversity and inclusion directorate to ensure people's differences are valued. And in a new publication about British Army leadership, the writer makes the point that the old-fashioned military way of expecting soldiers to surrender their personalities and thought to the discipline actually weakens the forces. And the new way of emphasis is servant leadership. They use that term. And individual needs is the way to success in the mission. Quite something. Jesus has said to his disciples, so you want to be first? You want first place? Then take the last place. Be the servant of all. Who welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. And now, in our reading today, the disciples come to Jesus with stories of someone casting out demons in his name. Just a little bit comical, don't you think? Like children telling tales. We told them to stop, he said. He's not one of us. Jesus is firm, very firm and serious. Don't stop him, Jesus said. In effect, he's not against me, he's on my side. And the little ones he's talking about, the root word in this place means those less experienced, i.e. those new to faith. Jesus says to his disciples, don't you worry about him, you worry about yourselves. Are you getting in the way of these people who are new to faith, just beginning to walk in my way? Are you being stumbling blocks to their faith? It's a serious question that we need to keep at the forefront of our minds if we're working on being Jesus' disciples. It's not a comfortable thought. Do we still have prejudices? Are we still in any way judging how people live, how they dress, what they wear or don't wear, how they use the church and its grounds, whether they're regular at worship and so on and so on? It's good to remember, but do we still hark back to the good old days too much? Do we think that our way is the way? And are we even more critical of ourselves? How much energy I have, how much time I can give to church activities, all those feelings excuse me, of not being good enough, about not understanding enough, about church, about being a Christian, excuse me. Are we critical of all those and of ourselves, and we have all those feelings about being not good enough, about not understanding enough about church, about being a Christian, about the Bible, who Jesus was, and how he's with us today? So many things are stumbling blocks, get in the way of moving forward in faith and learning to be a disciple, a follower of God through Jesus. Perhaps we can remind ourselves of what St. Paul says when he likens the church, people aiming to follow Jesus, Christians, to be a human body. All of us, those of us who are younger and more able, with more energy, and those of us who have bits that don't work as well as they used to, know only too well that every bit of us needs to be as fully operational as possible for the whole of us to live a life as full as possible and do what we want to do, to work, play, be part of our family, be as productive and energetic as we possibly can and get the best out of life. Our eyes and ears need to be working so we can hear and see where we're going, and our muscles need to be strong to play and work and help practically, and our heart needs to keep on pumping and lungs need to keep on breathing. If any part of us isn't working as well as possible, the rest of the body has to compensate. It's a very good illustration of our church and our family and our community life. Back to the psalm and the what if, imagine question. As Martin explained at the beginning of the service, what were our fellowship groups have now been called cell groups. Yes, it's still about fellowship and meeting together and praying and worshipping together, but it's about having a fresh look at how we work at being Jesus' disciples, continuing to grow ourselves and working out the best way to go and tell in our time, in our community. In many ways, the cell group material is and will be addressing the questions of how we as a church, as the Christian presence in this community, can be disciples and witness to this place, in this place. And I'm sure one of the big stumbling blocks to this vital work is fear and anxiety about what if our ideas, even after lots of prayer, seem to go pear-shaped. I imagine nations can run riot. What if no one listens? What if they laugh at us and don't want to know? What if it rains on that event we've planned? And there's that scary word evangelism. Oh, I'm so good at all those kind of thoughts. Maybe it's important to think, what if we don't? Get out of the what if, the negative what ifs out of the way, and then think, what if we do? And let God guide our imaginations his way. The what ifs were very much part of the ideas and discussions and plans for Messy Church, for the memory garden and benches, for community volunteers working in the church ground, for this more relaxed kind of worship, for church open times and for the coffee morning. But all of these, of course, health and safety has had to be key. But if we'd allow the negative ifs to be stumbling blocks that stopped us going with the what if he do's, none of these would have happened, and so successfully. I'm sure anybody who's taken up work in the community, who's taken up a role in the church, has been full of the what ifs. I'm sure Lee and Margaret had plenty of what ifs when they were considering and going into their training. I know I did. Couldn't see how it was going to work. What if, what if, what if? The Psalms are such a wonderful gift we have from God through Scripture, which can always help us to be real about our fears and our despair and anger, the disappointment, as well as the joys and hopes and praises. Help us with the what ifs. At the clergy conference in the cathedral a week or so ago, John Bell was the main speaker. Now, Martin thoughtfully gave us the link through the daily email so we could watch his 3 sessions. John Bell is an inspirational speaker, and I do recommend, if you haven't caught them already, that you catch up with them, especially the first one on prayer. In that session, John Bell referred to Psalm 88, which is a complete contrast to Psalm 124 and all of the group of psalms which worshippers used as they climbed up the steps to worship in the temple. It's one of the most unhappy, the most miserable and painful of psalms, But John Bell suggested it's one that can profoundly and deeply express what we're truly feeling in a way that we're only able to express that. It can be incredibly healing to be able to be real, to be truthful about our deepest feelings and fears and worries and negative what-ifs. John Bell also told us how he had discovered that sometimes it's important to stop trying to tell God what to do, what we'd like him to do. Please, God, help so-and-so to do such and such. And pray, God, I don't know what to do. He found that when he did that, he began to notice how things began to change. We say, don't we, let go and let God. Sometimes we need to remember to do just that. I need to let go and let God much more often than I do. If we find that we're stumbling because of fears of the what-ifs, because of our weaknesses, our tiredness, our feelings, our griefs and worries, maybe the Psalms can help us to express that before God. Be profound, be real before him. He is on our side. He does want us to grow and develop. He does want us to do his work through Jesus. And he's placed each one of us right where he wants us to be. As one of those Psalms says, he has a sovereign plan for you, for me, for our church. As Psalm 132 reminds us, God is on our side and blesses our efforts, however they turn out. And from today's Psalm, Psalm 140, and the Message version again. If God hadn't been for us, all together now, Israel, sing out. If God hadn't been before us when everyone went against us, oh, blessed be God. He didn't go off and leave us. He didn't abandon us, defenseless, helpless as a rabbit in a pack of snarling dogs. He never went off and leaves. He never goes off and leaves us. Then don't let us allow the what-ifs to leave us helpless. Amen.